Welcome to the Behind the Art Inspiration podcast. In these special edition episodes of Creative Lifebook interviews, I'll meet with co authors of the book and discuss their creative life hacks. In this episode, I connect with artist Margot Dermody. Hope I said that right. The author of Chapter 15, Courage to Create, The Way of Peace. I'm your host, Caroline Karp, coming from my Clearwater, Florida studio. And this is the Creative Life book. It's full of reflections on the art of living a fully expressed life. It's written by Jessica Hughes, along with 65 thought leaders, wellness experts, artists, and creatives. And the foreword is written by Dr. Joe Vitale. So thank you so much for joining me today, Margot. And we have been talking a little bit before we went live. And the first thing that caught my eye when I came on screen with her is the beautiful glass piece. I see there on both sides, but the blue one, I was on your website before we came on, and I noticed something. I noticed, first of all, I love them, but I noticed that your abstract paintings have an effect to them, which probably glass does the same thing. And what I mean by that is maybe you can put it in words better than me if you even know what I'm talking about. It's sort of like a reflective kind of a little bit opaque over the face of the art. Anyways.
Right. Well, thank you for having me. Yes, yes. Light is a big thing in my work. And so I do try to use paints that pick up with the light. And that is, and I do a lot of layering.
Mhm.
So what you're seeing is a different type of, and mostly that comes from an acrylic paint that Golden has that can pick up the light. So yeah, that's what you're seeing. And I love it. I love to look at art in different types of light in different locations. And especially, I like to bring it out into natural light because nature is a huge, huge motivating and inspiration for me with my art. So, yeah, you're picking up. My art is really about a lot of expressive feelings.
Mhm.
And then I do mixed media work where I'll bring in photography, and I'm just ever evolving. So tomorrow I might just do something else, and that's okay. I mean, change is really a part of what I live for. So
Um,
it's super.
Another thing we talked about, and we'll get to your chapter, which is Courage to Create, The Way of Peace. We talked about how you've kind of reinvented yourself. What did you say, 4 times? And and art has played a piece in that. And even though it may not have been like art in the form of like a painting or a glass work, I think the very first thing that you talked about has elements of art to it. Um, I think the very first thing you said was hotels and management.
Mhm.
And when I go into a hotel, I'm always looking at the artwork in the lobby or um, just how things are arranged. I'm sure there's an art to that. So I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. Everything I've done, I've loved the creative part of it. I've loved the art. I've been an art collector, art appreciator all my life, and I've sort of resisted it. My mom is an artist,
Mm.
and she would always tell me, "You are an artist." And I would say, "No, I'm going to be a business person. I want the freedom. I want to make money." So I had my own identity, and I wanted to go out into the world, and travel was a big thing in different cultures. So, because we lived in Italy for a year when I was growing up, when I was 12, and that's when I got into ceramics because I couldn't speak the language. I was thrown into an Italian speaking school. And so that's when I knew that art was a part of my life because I was exposed to just beautiful art in Italy. I learned the language, and I also just used drawing, painting, and ceramics as a form of expression because I couldn't speak the language for a while. So back to hotels, that the reason I graduated as an economics major, and I thought, I don't want to just do an MBA. I don't want to just do a finance. I love hotels and travel and accommodations. And as a sales and marketing person, you're using your five senses all the time when you create events, when you create travel groups for people. It's extremely creative. So I loved that, and I did that for a while in New York City and Boston. And then I had kids, decided to take a break when we moved to Nashville, and then I got back into the teaching of hospitality. I became director of hospitality management at Belmont University. And that's where I learned how to write. I got into the creativity of, at that point, PowerPoint was a big deal. And the internet was just coming along. So I had to learn, when I taught travel and tourism management, I had to learn the internet because travel changed. All of a sudden, we had to do it all ourselves. So there was a lot of creativity in that particular role. And so I published in academic journals, double blind, tier one journals. And it was good. It was so much fun. I mean, I really had a great time. I designed courses. So I did that for 15 years. And then here we go, a different identity. Again, the mom thing too, it was a big factor in teaching was really good, but I'd have to put on my professor role and go in. But then I really, really loved being a mother of two boys, 2 years apart. And I had a guest speaker for a summer camp when I was teaching a course in the summer. And that speaker was a realtor. And it was the time, it was about 2006, right before 2007 and 8 happened. And that particular speaker said, real estate is so amazing. You could do it all over the world. You can now do your documents. And I thought, that's what I want to do. I want to get back into accommodations. My big thing when I was a realtor, I affiliated with a great local brand. And my thing was blending the business and art of real estate, because there is a real art to it. You have to, when you work with a buyer, you're working with a personal situation and you're trying to find where they're going to live. When you're working with a seller, you help them get their house, all the five senses again, ready to put on the market so that you get to a close, which is the cycle, the business cycle. If you're a good realtor, you want to do all the elements to close the property so you can make some money and the people can do what they want, which is their goal, to sell or buy. I loved it. I actually loved it. It was a little bit draining. What I loved about it is I could do it every day and I could take off time during the week. But I knew, I started, visualizing that I wanted to get back into art. And that happened. It started when I was in my early 30s and my kids were young, and I took a class in watercolor. And then I just said, I'm going to do this one day. Someday I'm going to do this. And a friend of mine had an opportunity and she started painting and built a studio. So I was designing a studio in a house that we had. And then we decided to move. We had been in Nashville 26 years. And my husband got a good opportunity, and we've been together over 40 years. So I've been one of these long-term marriage situations. We met in high school, broke up for 5 years, and then reconnected. But anyway, we decided to make this move, and I said, I'm going to have an art studio, and I'm going to do the art thing. So I've been doing it now, 6 years. 6 years professionally, but I've been doing it all my life. Creativity has been part of me and my life. So that's why I wrote about the courage to create, because I think, it takes a lot of courage, which is doing it despite fear and being uncomfortable and just pushing right through. Let's see, my definition of courage, I love to read it. The ability to do something that frightens one, strength in the face of pain or grief. And I've had some situations in my life too, where I really had to pick up and just get through some trauma that happened to me and just get past it. and live through it and be courageous and do my thing. So, so this is my fourth and last final lovely stage in my life where I can do whatever I want, create things that I enjoy and that I love. And after the first year and a half of having a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, really, can I do this? And having a little bit of help on that, I now know that it's up to me. It's totally up to me to do whatever I want. And it takes being kind to yourself and loving to yourself and knowing yourself to have the energy to come and start new work. And so I talk about that in my writing. I talk about like how the beginning of a creation. Yeah. So, so you want to ask me a question about it? So I can talk on, but I love to interact.
I actually wanted to loop back to your work, because another thing that I noticed is,
Yeah.
and the really lovely thing about this book is that any creative that you want to learn about or wellness expert, you'll find a link at the end, and I'm going to put that in the show notes also. So I was able to go learn all about Margot and learn about her link, and so of course I went and looked at her work and saw the different books and magazines she was in. And um you know, if you were to look at your, because on there you have your glass work, you have your drawings on paper, and you
Mhm.
have your works on canvas and I think wood. But what's continuous is, they all have a similar quality. So even the small works that are on paper are reflective. They're, I see your use of blue, and I don't know. I love seeing threads. So I love seeing threads and putting together and looking at styles.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
is that conscious, or are you just kind of doing it because it's your style?
I think it's just I'm being me. I'm being me, and light is a big bringing in the light from the darkness is a huge topic, and it's related to just keeping a strong mental health and seeing it in my life with people I love, and seeing that anyone at any time can have a struggle with um, feeling like everything's in the dark. And so I think that, I like to think of, the darkness is wonderful too. We need our rest. We need the dark. We need to then also know how to live in the dim light. We need to teach children to not just have everything bright. And sometimes the spotlight is a lot. And sometimes that's too much light. So I just think the whole like rhythm of we will have times in our life. I have cats running around here
I just
too.
saw your cat. It's like calling all
For
cats.
those of you who are not watching this, a cat came onto the desk of Caroline. So
Yeah,
it made me laugh because I love animals, love
I
animals.
read that. Yes.
Yeah, but light, if you work at it, you're always going to find the light in everything. And there's lessons to be learned in those hard times.
Mhm.
And for me, I had to teach my children that, they grew up with culture that was, um, the internet and messaging, and they have learned to, they've had to learn how to do life in times that are hard. So that, bring it like recovery and like feeling good and bringing that. There's my cat back
I
there.
saw him. Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's part of why I do what I do.
Mhm.
And I like to feel good doing things. At times, there'll be a layer of darkness, but I tend to bring the light in after. And so I'll work through many, many layers of feelings and emotions. And then I tend to get to the light. So sometimes you won't even know
Yeah.
what's behind my work or
Mhm.
inside of it. And that's that tension that is part of fine art. And it makes it a little bit different than just a decorative art piece for a function. So
Yeah.
I like that. And I feel like it's been identified by people who have looked at my art, that you can see the deepness in it and that I've gone through a lot.
Mhm.
So, and that's what my art practice is really about. And that's what I wrote about, getting really vulnerable and using your true nature, your integrity to help you get to a very peaceful state, because a lot of it, life is filled with anxiety and excitement, and that's fine. But I like to level off to a more easy, what do I love? What is easy for me? And how can I get from the swings to a more peaceful transition? And so that's why a way of peace for me is something that I practice every day. And it's very much part of my, between the light and peace, those are, and nature kind of includes everything. But you'll see that thread through my paintings, my drawings, my sculpture. I like to use white marble in my sculpture. I like to have opaque and transparent, and it's just a lot of fun. It's so much fun. I have a really good person who taught me a lot of my sculptural work, and he's now helping me as a fabricator. So I kind of have a team. I also have a new assistant who is super smart. I had a hacked Instagram account that had 2,800 followers last summer, and I was changing my password in an unsecured network in a hotel because my son sent me a bad link, and all of a sudden messages were coming and going, and my whole account got taken over.
Mm.
And for almost a year, so just a month ago, I got it off. And my assistant is going to law school. And I told her, I said, why don't you just try to do this on my behalf? And why don't you just act like my lawyer? And she got it on the first try. And I tried 100 times to get this account off Instagram because it's my intellectual property, all my postings, all
Yeah,
my
yeah.
stuff. And someone just took it over. And it was just very annoying. It was called Margot Dermody Art on Instagram. So I mean, I am very thankful that I didn't have any of my financial accounts hacked, but it can happen. I don't know if you know anyone else that's had a hacked account, but you've got to be
Oh,
careful. So now I'm building my little baby account that started with 200 followers. I'm up to 800 something,
that's
probably
great.
820. Yeah, and Instagram used to be much more engaging. And so I would do a post and I'd get a lot of engagement and lots of likes. And now, I'm just trying to be myself and do my own thing and not worry about it because it's social media is just one thing. And I really am trying to now get more site visits and be more intentional on who I show my work to and who I might partner with in the future to help.
Absolutely.
Because, and I'm looking at it, Jess has really been helping me with this. I knew how to write press releases when I did marketing for hotels. And so why wouldn't I want to try to do that? So, but the whole art world is very juried, and you need to do this and you need to do that and you need to show. And I'm like, do I really need to? Or can I just be me
Yeah.
and show my work? And if I connect with someone, be happy about that and know that my work's only, it's not going to connect with everyone because I don't like everybody's work. So
Yeah.
so now I'm really looking at it much more open-minded and thinking I can develop my business just by being who I am and doing what I love to do.
Yeah.
And so now I have this nice assistant for the summer, and I just believe in collaboration. I believe in teams, and I believe in asking for feedback and just trying to be open to that. So
Well,
that's
the
been really fun.
podcast, this podcast, is all about that connection and everybody just kind of showing up, and
Yes.
our conversation just flows. And you get a little hit of inspiration, and somebody says something where you're like, oh, that sounds interesting, or uh that's kind of how it all started, was during the pandemic. I wanted to reach out to people everywhere, the artists that were all stuck in their studios. So yeah, it's been really interesting meeting all the different kinds of people.
Yeah.
Um, if you were to give advice to somebody listening who is maybe feeling a little bit stuck in their corporate job or whatever, where they're thinking they can't be creative, but they want to be creative, how would you tell them to go about getting their own courage to do that?
Yeah. Okay. That's a great question. Well, first of all, I think if I was in a corporate job and I wanted to get a little bit more creative, I would start thinking, what can I do in my job to make this more fun? Fun is a big thing for me. If it's not fun, I don't want to do it. I really just, it's got to be exciting and it's got to be something I'm passionate. So I would start with the job. And from the job, I would say, what else do I love? What else do I love in life? Like, kind of get back to your 8-year-old self or whatever year that you remember that you did things like I was a big outside person. I would walk along the creeks and skip stones, and I love to swim. Now I'm doing all of these things. But for years, I didn't do it. So I'd say get back to everything that you love, your passions. That will give you energy. So with that energy, you will want to create. Start slowly. Take a journal, start drawing, just whatever you want to do. Cook. That's another thing.
Yeah.
Fiber arts, crochet. When I was taught by Italian grandmothers in a park, and I still haven't gotten back to crocheting, but I have 2 friends in a creative group who are actively doing it, and they're artists, and they just love crocheting, and they're just doing all sorts of stuff. I think what you have to work on, like, who you are and what you love. And from that, it's almost like I'm also a horseback rider, and that's what I loved as a kid. And I have a quarter horse, and everything that I learn in life, he kind of teaches me too. Both of us need to work on relaxation. We have a lot of energy. Energy plus relaxation equals power. So you're trying to get your power. So if you're in a rut and you're in a corporate job, I would say just start it, maybe even start collecting art. Collecting art is what I did for years. I supported local artists. I
Mhm.
got to know local artists. I got to know that my taste in art was good. And that really made me feel like an artist. And so when I started actually doing my work, I started trusting in my process. And that really helped me say, okay, how do I know when I'm done with this abstract piece? I know when I'm done. I know that when I love it, I'm done. And maybe I'll stop and maybe I'll get back to it. But it's always, the starting, you're really anxious. And I talk about that process. You're a little bit, it's a beginning, a new beginning, and everything is a new beginning. But you've got this beautiful, like, gesso on canvas, and you just pour it and you can do all sorts of things. Just do it. You can always paint over it. It gets very messy in the middle where you might think, I ruined it. Don't worry about that. Just think of playing, think of the process. And then finally, as you slow down, you're starting to trust your taste. And that's when you feel like you're done with the process. And then you put that somewhere and you start something else. But I think if you think of it as play and you think of your marks as unique marks, and it doesn't have to be perfect, it doesn't have to be just like another artist that you love. I mean, I think it's good to emulate different styles that you like. But one piece of advice that someone gave me, and I'm going to pass this on, is when I was starting to say, am I an abstract expressionist? What am I? She says, you can be whoever you want to be. And I love that because I started doing different things, and I feel like now I've got, I've got so many ideas. Like, why can't I, if I've resisted doing figurative art, why can't I now get into it? Why can't I do some drawings that are nice and minimal? And I can do anything. And the pandemic showed me that. I did some really strange art, and I was just by myself. I did a lot of pours,
Mhm.
and I would look at things and I would just love it and I would let it sit. And I would say, okay, I think that's done. And it was very bold because it was so minimal, some of my work. So back to the advice, I would say just do it. Don't worry about what other people are thinking. Don't worry too much about what you think. Try not to judge it. Try to judge it in a loving way instead of a critical way, because you will probably, if you love art or if you want to get creative, you probably have that critic in there. Just hold that inner critic, at bay and let yourself enjoy it. So I guess I would just say go for it, and just if you decide that you need more time, you might want to downsize your corporate or change it up. I just think it's a self-discovery. That's the big thing. If you just work on who you are and who you're changing, I think this is kind of an interesting thing to think of. All change is an act of creation. So I've always heard the expression courage to change, but one thing, I was like in a meditative state and I thought, courage to create. That's really what I need to do, because I've been coming back to art and it's taken a lot of courage to say, I'm an artist. I'm going to create. And so I think courage is really a big thing, to get past all the fear of what do people think? What do I think? Just doing it. And when you think of it, that all change is an act of creation, I think that's an amazing thing to just think about, to ponder. Wow, all change is an act of creation.
Well, thank you, Margot, so much for
Yes,
coming and being with us on the podcast. And thank you, everybody, for watching and listening
you're
as I
welcome.
share my love of fun, connection, collaboration, and art. It would be great if you subscribed. And being a facilitator of conversation, um, we just let the conversation flow. But thank you so much again, and I'm sure that you'll come back on the podcast because we have a lot more to talk about.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. It was so much fun.
Thanks. Bye.